One of the biggest challenges for coaches, practitioners, and hypnotherapists is getting clients. As coaches ourselves, we know how difficult it is on social media to stand out and gain credibility. That is why at Life Coaching Today, we connect coaches like you with clients. It all starts with our directory, where it's possible to create a profile that gets the right exposure with over 12,000 hits a month. You can gain credibility by writing for Life Coaching Today magazine, add videos, be interviewed on our podcast, teach classes in the community, and sell your products directly from our website. Not to mention, we actually connect clients who are actively searching for coaches who can best serve them. So if you are struggling to get clients, have Life Coaching Today help you get more clients. Go to lifecoachingtoday.com.
Hey everyone, I am back and I'm actually going to switch my laptop just a little bit. I'm actually kind of liking this widescreen because y'all were about to see what was just my little Roku TV going. But now that I've calmed myself down from my being flabbergasted moment, I just want to say that this is a wild world that we live in and that we need to be very mindful of what our children are consuming. Especially if they're able to consume negative things. You know, it's like negative things, but it's also some kids will take this information about like what I was talking about, like a forensic, and say like, oh my gosh, I saw something on TV. I want to do that as an occupation. That's what we hope. We don't want children to take information and then just go ahead and say we want to do negative things with it, right? And if our children are watching certain conversations, certain movies, we need to take the time to discuss with them, right? Like, what did you see? What did you think about that? Do you think, we got to ask some questions, parents. But listen, y'all, welcome back. My name is Kadada Esmera Gray. I'm your conflict coach because, I'm ranting and raving this good hot Friday. And so I am so excited. I'm super excited to have you all with me on the Conflict Whisperer podcast on the Life Coaching Today platform, because we have one of another. I have a lot of awesome chicas on this show. And this mommy who is fierce, I'm calling her fierce because she saw a conflict, and you know how I love a good conflict, that needed to be addressed. And that conflict is simply this. And as simple as it sounds, it is so vitally important. And it is I want to use the word humongous. I really want to deal with it and from a humongous standpoint, because how we teach boys emotional maturity on the other side of their young personhood into adulthood is showing up with men and inside of men that aren't really emotional mature. And when I say that, I don't mean that disparagingly. I'm just meaning that they are lacking certain tools and words. And sometimes emotional words aren't their favorite things. And sometimes the problem is that we have choices, and then sometimes we're just not taught to know. And so Miss Lisa Michele Burns is going to join us, and we're going to bring her on because she, I think, has cracked the code for young people ages 4 to 8, specifically young boys, 4 to 8, with her book. And I'm going to write it. I had to write it down because in my mind, I always think of another title. I'm going to tell you what the title is, but with the book called Knights Academy, Legends in the Making. And then not only did she do that, she also wrote a curriculum for moms and boys to work through together to discuss their emotional maturity journey, but also heal the relationship between moms and boys when boys are acting out and moms need to hold themselves accountable to maybe some of their issues and challenges. Now, y'all can push back if you want to, but this is real life what we're talking about, especially when moms are the ones that are raising children. And when I say that, listen, y'all, don't come for me. Don't be like, oh, I'm a dad and I do this. Listen, Moms are the ones that do 90% of the care. Go check statistics. And so emotional care is also one of those things. So we're going to talk to her. And so we can go ahead and bring her on and welcome her to the show. And if you're like, Kadada, I have been listening to you for a while. I've been following your podcast. And you're like, I don't understand why you keep having authors on. And I'm going to tell you why I keep having authors on. The reason I keep having authors on is not only because I'm an author, but because authors find the conflicts in the world and they write about it and they provide solutions. And so we're just not in the land of make believe. We're just not writing fairy tales, even though fairy tales were written so that way they can teach a morality perspective that we should have introduced into our children. And so that's why it's just a different perspective and a different way to execute, right? How it is that we come and we to achieve a goal. And this one is, how do we teach boys emotional maturity? And so, Lisa, Michelle, welcome to the show. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I so much appreciate you having me on the show, as well as helping me with the technical difficulties.
No worries. No worries at all. So, Lisa, here on the show, I don't like to tell anyone's story. I like to tell everyone's name, but I don't like to tell everyone's story. And so I'm going to give you the platform to tell your own story.
All right.
And introduce yourself to the crowd on the Conflict Coaching Podcast.
All right. Well, thank you so much. My story really pretty much begins with being told by a doctor that I was never going to have children. And so I kind of was like, okay, I accepted that. My sister, I always wanted a boy. Always wanted a baby. So my sister had a baby boy, and I thought, okay, well, this is it. I was always manifesting, but not really understanding that I was manifesting.
Yeah.
So I just totally poured all my love in him. I always studied children and how to raise them and psychology and just everything. I was always in daycare. And then I had my own son, and I was so excited. And he started talking at 5 months old. And so I put him in preschool because everyone's like, oh, you need to socialize him. So I put him in preschool at the age of 3. And there was the beginning of what I saw with like teachers expecting certain behaviors out of boys. My son knew his ABCs, his 1, 2, 3s. He knew the weather. He knew everything at the age of 3, when others were just beginning to speak. And so I watched her. I had, parents had to go in and be a teacher helper. And even with me there, she was pretty hard on my son. They would do the ABCs, and he would do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and he would go really fast. And she would pounce on him and tell him, Ryan, you need to slow down. And with the weather, she would always get on his case. And so I went to the principal of that little preschool, and I said, she's not being very kind to my son. And I took him out early. And I was like, well, I'm not going to stop teaching him. So I decided to homeschool him. And by the time he was 4, he was in 1st grade. And we were through everything. And, there was like a pride. It was like, oh, this is so amazing. This is wonderful. But at the same time, it was like, oh my goodness, how do I keep up with this kid? And then I was reading books all on my own and learning about parenting. And they would say, don't be easy on them. Keep going kind of hard on them, especially boys. And I was like, okay. So I was like, all right, well, so I made sure that I was kind of hard on my son because they will live up to our expectations, right? And so by the time he was 15, he was already almost graduated with high school. And for me, that was exciting, but I was like, oh my land, what am I going to do with him now? He's going to be 16. He can't, I can't have him go out in the workforce, even though he kind of worked.
Right.
And so then he was in Taekwondo, and we had to drive an hour away for Taekwondo. Now, I was a Tiger mom. I was tough on them. I made sure that everything was perfect. Everything always had to be perfect. And so we were in Taekwondo, and he had to be perfect there as well. And when he was driving, it was an hour away. We were driving, and we got into a car accident. The man behind us, all the traffic came to a halt, and the man behind us did not stop, and his car came up into our trunk. And at that moment, something changed in me. My son became my hero because I couldn't even turn down the radio. I couldn't roll down a window. I couldn't do anything. And after that, I lost my communication skills. I couldn't speak. I couldn't read. I couldn't comprehend. I could do nothing. And so all the affection that I had with my children, I could no longer do. And so I was watching my son. He was acting just fine, but I had to put him in school. I put him in a dual credit school. And he acted normal, but his behavior told me something was off. Because he was the perfect kid. Like, really, he was absolutely perfect. I was hard on him, but he was perfect. And almost perfect. I shouldn't say perfect.
Yeah.
Because nobody's perfect.
You're a mom. I understand.
But after that, oh my land, we had so many things to deal with, and I could not be the mom that I was any longer. I had to pull back and get to know myself. And then watching his behavior, I'm like, oh my land, what can I do to help? So when at one of the competitions, one of the moms, as we were walking back, we were walking back, and then we went back to Colorado, and the mom called me, and she said that while we were in the parking garage, my son, he didn't do well that day. And had said that that he could just hang himself in that garage and no one would care.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, what? That was kind of always in the back of my mind, but I was like, what? No way. Like, you're just, how awesome you are. Like, because I would always tell him how awesome he is as well. So then I took him to the top psychologist in our state, and that psychologist asked us if we were in a car accident court case, and I said yes. And he said, well, I will not testify. And I said, that's fine. Just, I need you to help him. I don't want him to do that. And he's like, just so you know, I will not testify. And I'm like, that's fine. Don't testify. And so he came back and he was like, oh, he has mild depression. He's normal. He's fine. In the car, my son looked at me and he was like, Mom, thank you for believing me. And I was like, oh, wow. So and then after that, I was like, okay, let's try more counseling. I need to find a counselor to help him, right? Because this was his problem and we need to do something to make him better.
Right.
So I had taken him to several other counselors, and all these counselors were like, the issues that, because I knew everything he was going through. He would talk to me. And so all these other counselors like, well, I can't help him. I finally found one, and I told him, I said, because I had told them everything. And this one was like, okay, I'll work with them. It doesn't sound that bad. And then I was in Las Vegas, and I got a call, and he's like, can you come in immediately? And I said, no, because I'm in another state. And he was like, you're right. Your son is in grave danger. And I'm like, I told you. I've been telling everybody. But during that time, I had also been reading on the emotional intelligence and the emotional stuff that our boys go through, because we're told that our boys are tough and strong and that they're just supposed to know how to be a man. And by being told you need to step up and be a man, right? That's how we tell our sons to grow up and be a man, is you need to step up and be a man. And so while he was going to counseling and these counselors were not helping, after that call, the counselor was like, I can't help him, but he's in grave danger. I can't help him. And I was like, oh my land. And so my son started bringing his friends over, and I started doing like work with them too, because these boys, they were such good boys. They were really good boys, but they were drinking and doing things and getting into serious trouble. I mean, so much trouble that I had to go to the hospitals with them because they were overdosing. I was in courts with them. I was there with them because they wanted me to be there. And so in court especially, it was all boys that were there, teenaged boys. So I started doing things that I was learning on these boys that would come to my house, and they would tell me, you need to work with my mom. Can you work with my mom so she can learn to love me? And I was like, absolutely, buddy. So that's how everything got started. Was the car accident opened my eyes and helped me to understand that, our boys are really, truly struggling.
So thank you for that, because I know that you and I have had plenty of conversations, right? We've been talking about, what's wrong with boys, what's going on with boys. And I have shared a couple stories with you about, like, there's a book that talks about what's the matter with boys or something to that effect. And there's a new book that came out, I think, in 2024, as well as, just this idea. I think I told you, like, my daughter's now 26, but many years ago, like, there was a separation. We went back to, they did a test, and this happened before, you guys, like, education. There was a time in education when there were girls' classrooms and boys' classrooms. Don't believe there's nothing new under the sun. Okay. But we can see in statistics and in research that when boys and girls are separated, they actually excel in their education. And when the reason for that is that because they're not worried about the social issues and the social norms that they have to execute between boys and girls, right? So there's some benefits to that. So for all of you all that are like, no, they need to learn how to deal with each other, let them do it at recess, okay? But not during the education process. And so, because little girls, for all you all that are like, that's not true, little girls dump down. And then if a boy feels like a little girl is smaller than him, he starts to feel small.
Yes.
And he can act out, and it can cause problems, right? So that's a challenge. And so, Lisa, I appreciate you noticing as a parent, right, that there was something wrong with your child. And let me just say, as a parent of a gifted son, let me tell you, schools do not do what they're supposed to do in gifted programs. They don't. But this is not what this show is about. I won't have that discussion today. I will say this though. You decided not only to interact and kind of be like what I call an armor bearer to other children and stand in the place of their parents for them. You also decided that you were going to write about this.
That's correct.
What made you decide that you were going to write about this?
Well, it was mostly because I believe that the awareness needs to be out there. We need to learn how to interact with our boys, because our interaction with our boys is very cold. Whereas with girls, it's so kind and, oh, let me take you shopping. Let me do this. Let me do that. And our boys, it's more like we're tough on them. We're hard on them. You need to get out there and work, and you need to do this. And there's not so much kindness. And then sometimes it could be too much kindness where they become mama's boys and they learn how to kind of put themselves in a shell and not get out there and be what they were created to be. And so, and especially when those boys came to me and they said, can you please teach my mom how to love me? That hit hard. That hit really hard. And so, that was my pivotal moment. And I'm like, oh, Meland, right now I can't even speak. I can't even comprehend what I'm learning. How am I going to help your mom?
Right. And yeah, on this podcast, I talk about, and if you listen to the previous podcast when I deal with masculine and feminine energies, like one of the things, and if my followers know that I love history, right? So I will always go digging for information. And one of the things that I always talk about is the patriarchy. And I'm not throwing men under the bus, but I do want to remind us all, whether you believe it or not, that the definition of manhood and masculinity came from men. So the expectation that we have of men, the behaviors that we have of men, that we see, that we expect men to execute, those attributes and characteristics actually come from men. And unfortunately, women have decided that we're going to claim those same things and execute it on our boys.
Yes.
And you said something. And so let me just say this, you guys. So there are two programs. There's like two versions. There's like the book, right? Knights Academy. Like, I just love this. Legends in the Making, which I loved the book, you all. Even adults will get something from this book. And I love this book because it reminded me of, I'm a big Arthur, Knights of the Round Table fan, King Arthur. And that's what it made me think of. And then the other side to this track is a workbook curriculum for moms and sons. Okay. And so that way they can work through the healing of that. But one of the things that I want to just say right now is that, and I have to read it because I lifted it out of the book. And so you discuss the mask that boys have to wear.
Yes.
And I'm going to read a passage. It's a short passage, y'all, I promise. I'm going to read a passage that you said. And you say, this mask shows the world they are tough, fearless, meaning they have to go along with any peer pressure without realizing they will be left alone to deal with the consequences and that emotions aren't that important. However, we have come to find that behind that mask. And I stopped there because I was like, oh my gosh, she is the second person that I've ever heard talk about the mask that boys wear. So can you talk more about that?
Absolutely. So it starts very, very early, especially like in preschool or daycares. They start right there. Even in that young of an age, they are expected to not cry as much as a girl or be as vulnerable as a girl. However, we have come to know that boys are actually more deeply sensitive than girls are. And so when we tell them, stop your crying, or we ignore them when they're crying, or we just kind of, or when they're upset, we teach them that your emotions are not valuable. And so therefore they have to build up a wall of protection. Basically what happens is their subconscious splits, and then there's a protection wall that that goes up. And that's the mask. That is the mask that the world sees, that I'm not going to show you my emotions. I'm not going to show you that hurt me. I'm not going to show you any of that, because that's all that they are allowed to have. They aren't allowed to feel things. So they had to develop a protection, kind of like a shield in a battle.
Yeah. Just
So,
like in
yeah.
I thank you for that, because my ex, one of my exes, he said that to me about he had on a mask when he moved into this world, when he moved into the world, right? That means via his interactions, he always wore a mask. Now, I thought that was interesting. And then he gave me an example. Here's what's interesting. So here's a task for you all. He said he had a photo of himself before he accepted his emotional intelligence, right? Like that emotional maturity. And there's one version of him that he's really angry. He looks very angry. That was his mask. And he said that was that interaction that he needed to have with fellow men. Right. And I was shocked by that. And then to see another picture when he stood in who he was with his emotional intelligence and emotional maturity, he was softer. And so I found that to be so fascinating, because women don't have to think about it like that, right? We wear our emotions, we practice our emotions. We literally practice our emotions, you guys. And you are correct that we teach boys, some of us don't allow boys to have that type of emotional maturity. It's like we train them up, and then I'm like, who are you training them up to be?
Exactly.
Who are we training them up to be? So one of the other question that I had for you, though, was when you talk about them starting to accept all of the emotions on the emotions wheel, right? Is that your definition of masculinity, or them being masculine? How do you as a mom teach boys to be masculine?
Okay, so masculinity is not just opening the doors and doing gestures. Boys naturally want to give. That is what they were created to do. They're givers, women are receivers, and then the boy gets the love from the woman, and then he wants to give more, and it's a beautiful cycle when allowed to run naturally. Masculinity is allowing him to be naturally who he is. They are naturally protectors. Naturally. They are naturally providers. They are in their authenticity very caring and very loving and doting, and they will give of everything of themselves to protect the ones that they love. That's, in my definition, a masculine man. He knows who he is so well on a soul level that he will be authentic in his actions with people.
So. I love that. In the book, right? And I'm still sticking with, like, no, I'm going to get it wrong because I'm old school right now. But I think it's in the curriculum, the curriculum of mom and son, right?
Okay.
You said something that you teach a skill that I think was very fantastic up front. And you teach the mom and the son that they need to ground themselves.
Yes.
Tell us more about grounding and why you thought that was important.
Okay, so grounding to me means that you become so confident and comfortable with who you are, not with what the world expects you to see, but with who you are. And that means that we need to remove all of the limiting beliefs that have been bestowed upon us, such as, well, a boy is supposed to be like this, and a girl is supposed to be like this, and well, you're supposed to go to church every Sunday, and or all of those types of things that are put into our heads at very young age, before the age of 7. As a matter of fact, from the ages of the 3rd trimester all the way till the age of 7, we are kind of in a meditative state where we are learning what world is and what we are to expect from the world and how we are to navigate through the world. And so, yes, we're going to be downloaded with all kinds of information. But during that time and then after, especially, it needs to be more authentic of, does this resonate with you? Does this make you feel like who you were created to be? So
I want you guys to go buy this book because I think it teaches us, it teaches all of us values, to be honest. It is a reminder about our morals and values that I find to be pertinent for us to be good human beings towards each other. And in the book, you talk about boy code. And and let me just pull it up. I'm like, let me make sure. I wonder if I could clip something about that. But I did not. That's okay because I have so much stuff that I'm like, oh, I love this. But you were talking about boy code, and I have a feeling about boy code because I feel like everything that, and this is just me, you guys. This is my theory. This is my hypothesis. And sometimes I want to test it, and sometimes I give up on testing it. I feel like little boys are taught, right? They're taught by their moms and dads if they have both parents present. And we're going to say this from a healthy perspective. I'm not going to talk about anyone's negative parenting behavior or anything like that, because some parents are doing the best that they can. And then, we love on boys. We hug our sons. We do all those things on them. We do all these types of things. And they're very generous and kind to us, right? Especially moms. Let's be clear. Like the little boys, I have 2 sons. They would bring me stuff. They would, all kinds. I get flowers, all kinds of things. And then at a certain age, they decide that they want to be in the land of men. And some of these things go away. So you talk about the boy code. So I want you to explain boy code as you've written it in the book. And then I'll ask you another question after you decide you define that.
Okay. So a boy code is what they expect to do in society. They have to fit in. The boy code, there are certain things that they need to do, such as after a certain age, I can't give my mom a hug anymore in front of the school because I'm going to get harassed in classes and be called mama's boy and all these things. So boys feel shame on the deepest level. That is their biggest fear. A girl, she feels shame, but it's not that big of a deal. But a boy, shame is like the last thing that he can deal with. So therefore, he will protect himself on every level not to be shamed. And so therefore, he has to fit in with the society or with his friends or with whomever, because it's so important that he protects the most deepest, like it's like a turtle parts, the turtle on the outside, he's so hard, but on the inside, those are so gushy, and all the organs and everything are in there. And the boy code is the same way. The boy code, he needs to live up to certain expectations, which means that he will have to sometimes make a decision to not partake in family values or think that the family has told him this is most important, you need to do this, if he needs to fit in.
And you're
One
saying
of those things.
And you're saying he needs to fit in with other men, essentially.
Correct. Yes. One of the movies that is like really good at depicting this is School Ties. Brendan Fraser.
I'm not familiar.
Okay. It's a true story, actually, about a Jewish young man who needs to go to a school. I forgot which school it was. But for him to fit in, he cannot say he's Jewish. And so it goes all through him trying to navigate that. And that is a perfect example of a boy code right there. However, moms have a mom code too.
Yeah, we do. So here's part 2 to my question. Do you find that when they are moving in the space of boy code, that's where we get the toxic masculinity that is portrayed, that women are now identifying? And some young girls are identifying. Do you see that is the root of like toxic masculinity?
It's partially the root. It is kind of like a tree with the fruits. So what he feels about himself will come out. So if it's like the roots, how have the roots been nourished? However the roots have been nourished will produce the fruit. So if he's been praised and told that he's loved, and it's been a safe place for him to grow, and we all think, oh, our sons are in a safe place to grow, but sometimes we don't realize what they're truly going through.
Right.
And so what's really going on in their subconscious may be so totally different than what we see, and therefore their fruits are what is the toxic masculinity, is because yes, they do need to fit in. And a lot of times, because there is no accountability, there's no real training of what a man or a boy should look like, they have to figure it out on their own. And they do. And that's where we get that toxic masculinity from, is because they have to figure it out, because we do our best. Absolutely. We'll do like character training. We'll do all this and that, but we don't teach them to be authentic to themselves. We don't give them the room to feel their emotions, to express their emotions, to know who that they are. And yeah, so that's partially where that toxic masculinity comes in from, because they've got to figure it out. They've got to try to do it.
And it's interesting because they have to balance that with losing out in what I call the fraternity of men. Because if they show too much, then they're going to be replaced from they might lose friends. Exactly. And we know friendship is really important. Exactly. I keep saying this. You all need to go purchase this book. And I encourage mom, dad, sons, read this book. I would even encourage girls to read it. But one of the things that I noticed in the book, right, was that you wrote about all these different characters that were going through these different journeys. And the journey is associated with a value or emotional kind of phrase on the emotional wheel, right? Like having courage and let me just say, the things that Lisa talks about in the book, these characteristics, aren't inherently male. They actually are for all of us. We should all practice these types of values. But my favorite character was Jake. And I'm going to tell you why Jake was my favorite. And it's because as Jake was going through he was getting training, you guys, not to give away a lot of the book, but he was getting training and it wasn't working. And so just imagine that you drop your son off. I'll give you guys a good example. My son was a part of basketball, and we let our children always play sports, right? And sometimes you can tell that the training that the basketball coach is providing, it's not really healthy. And one of the experiences that I had with the basketball coach was that he would swear at the boys. And after one meeting, I said to him, I said, listen, I don't need you to swear at my son. Now, I was the odd woman out because a lot of the mothers there were single mothers, and they somehow believed that swearing at their sons made them into men, which is a wild connection to me. And so I was like, listen, don't speak to my son that way because you're killing his self-esteem. Because that's what's happening. Because it's a power dynamic. A little boy can say to a grown man, don't talk to me that way. And so I saw that same dynamic with Jay. He was getting his archery lessons. It wasn't working. He wasn't feeling positive. And one of the lessons that I took away, which I was like, I can't believe Lisa said this, was that like sometimes you have to pivot and go find somebody else to feed into you and pour into your soul. Yes. And I was like, that is a skill that all young people need. But throughout your text, there was the greatest allowance from the parents to have conversations with their children. And so how did you decide to write this text the way that you did?
So I really wanted it to be relatable to a boy in a fun way. And to anyone really, but in a fun way. And so, but I wanted them to learn emotional lessons along the way. And so, but it was really my son. My son is my inspiration for everything because the little boy that he was all of those things. He had to make hard decisions, and he did. He made a lot of really hard decisions. So a lot of the times, those characters in the book are what my son did kind of in a way, but I really wanted it to be relatable for other boys who may not have that kind of training to understand their emotions in themselves, to be able to relate with someone and be able to go, gosh, he's having a really hard time and he's going through something that I have gone through, and he did it. I can too. Because a lot of times there's not that influence out there that help them get through something that they know that they need to get through, but they just don't know how. Because it is in them that they want to do the right thing. They really do. Our boys are not dangerous. They're not inherently these evil things. They're really not. Everybody wants to say, oh my gosh, these boys are just dangerous from the second they're born. But that's not true. Our boys are born with so much love and so much emotion, so much kindness to give. It's just we don't know that because we've been trained for so many centuries that a boy is supposed to look a certain way.
That's right.
And that's why we treat them a certain way. So I needed to be able for a boy to relate to someone else who might be feeling the same way and go, oh, you know what? I can do that too if he did it.
Let me tell you guys, if you all are trying to figure out one of the greatest lessons, and not that Jake is still my favorite. I just want to say that Jake is still my favorite in the text. But the thread throughout, right? And I think the golden thread that I would say I found was the intimate relationships that boys have with other boys. And so I'm going to pause right there to say, in the world, you guys, an intimate relationship literally just means it can be a friendship. Like it's a bond. And so can we please move outside of all this negative stuff where we think it's a sexual relationship? Because it's not. And my heart was so full to see when one of your characters got into a fight with one of his friends and his heart hurt, right? Like he was really upset and he didn't know what to do. And he went back to his friend and after he spoke with his mother, but to have a conversation.
Yes.
And I enjoyed reading that.
Well, thank you.
And I just want to say to you, I don't know if it was courageous for you to write this book. I find that it took a lot of resiliency, but it also took a lot of awareness to say, this is what all boys need, and I champion you for that.
Oh,
Because
thank
I
you.
think that I think you told me we have to fight for boys, and we do.
We do.
We do. And I think the older we get, the more that we see, the more understanding, the things that we learn in this life, we know now, we should know now, that as human beings, that we need to function as human beings first without the label.
Yes,
And
exactly.
I I'm telling you guys, I'm just gonna keep saying it. Here's what I want to talk to you about, because I heard you say it. As soon as I read it, I heard you say it in my mind. I heard you say it. And all I could think about was you were really trying to work on that relationship between moms and boys.
Yes.
And your saying is, and I'm going to steal it and I will give you credit, but I will put it on my Facebook page. You said, I did all the right things in the wrong way.
Yes.
Tell me more as a mom and what you see other moms doing.
Well, for me, I did all the right training. I tried to make sure that he was going to be the best boy out there, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And now as I look back on it, I think partially it was because I was afraid of him in a sense. And it was his strength and his intelligence and all these things that I didn't know if I could keep up with him, you know, like his first grade at 4 years old, and then he's out of high school at 16, and you know, all these things. And he was so far advanced. I was like, oh my gosh. And I did not want him, and on top of that, I wanted him to be seen as, because he was strong, and I wanted him to be seen as a respectful young man, a man of worth and courage and all that stuff. So I taught him everything, but I pushed him away too soon, earlier than what he needed, because I did not want him to be, I wanted him as a mama's boy, but I didn't want the mama's boy, because, you know, I had to have this perfect life. And so my son being absolutely everything was partially, what I did, and I did it wrong, because I was very tough on him, and I taught him the right things, but I was very tough on him, and I pushed him away too soon. And emotionally, that hurts a boy. They need us. They need their mama. They need us to stay close with them. Anthony Rotundo said that boys always had a close relationship with their parents. And I can't remember who else said that, but boys need that relationship with their mom. It changes over time, but they need that. But we moms, we have this boy code too, where we've got to push them away, or we overprotect them. And so I did everything right, but I just did it all in the wrong way. I did it with a lot of frustration, a lot of anger, and not so much of love, of what he really truly needed. And so I want to help moms to understand that, there's a lot of frustration, a lot of things. I mean, the things that I went through with my son were just over the top, and I would get frustrated, but he didn't need me to get more frustrated during those times. He needed me to be loving and kind and understanding, because I didn't understand on his emotional level what was going on. One time, I don't know if I should say this or not. I don't know.
Listen, I'm a big fan of protecting the babies, and sometimes we'll say things that, you know, sometimes we don't say things about the babies that, you know, they might be upset about.
Yeah, exactly. Well, he went through things not on his own accord, but you know, at the same time too, like when you said the stories of the girls luring the boys into the forest or whatever to kill him.
This is an outdoor bathroom at the school. Yeah.
Okay. That actually happened to my son as well. And so that right there, I knew. And the thing was when he came back to the school and he told the school what had happened, they blamed him. They didn't blame the girl. They blamed him. And I'm like, so, you know, there are moments where we have to stand up. So, and not be so frustrated with them and understand where they're coming from too.
You talk about that the way that we interact with boys, in good example, right, is that we shell out consequences when they actually have a true need. And
Yes.
that was so profound to me, because I mean, even in movies, we see that. It's like, well, you guys were at fault because you didn't execute that way. And it's like, no, wait a minute. Like, they need the opportunity to be fearful. They need the opportunity to be scared or inwardly reflective. And I thought that it was, how do I want to say this? It's a brave statement because it challenges parenting norms to say that we are really we're not doling out opportunities for manhood, we're doling out consequences.
Yes.
And I thought that that was so brave of you. I do have a question for you, in all my list of questions, but you made me think about something. Do you think the phrase mama's boy is derogative or derogatory?
In the mom world, like the boy code and the mom code?
Well, just in general, like the mama's boy narrative, is that a derogatory thing? Should we retire it at this point?
The general consensus of it is it is a bad thing. But really, a mama's boy is a boy who's truly loved and deeply revered. So as long as it doesn't go overboard into being dependent on him for your emotional security, because we can do that. We can, you know, our husbands may not be available, or boyfriends or whatever may not be available, and we look to our son to fulfill that need, not knowing that we do that. So as long as it's a healthy relationship, and you can call your son a mama's boy for sure. But yes, most people look at it in a derogatory way. Should it be retired? I don't know. You know, I think that it really depends on the person. If you are okay with your son being called a mama's boy, call him a mama's boy. If not, you know, find another loving term for him. It's up to you.
I like that. And I always tell people that the people that define the words, that's why it's important to define the words, hold the power. And I think that what you said was really important about this idea of it's a child that's loved. You know, like, it's little girls, no one's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe her mom loved her too much, right?
Yes, exactly.
Boys, you know, if we say that with boys, I do have a challenge for you.
Okay.
That boys are natural protectors. But you said it in two different ways. You said the first way is that boys are natural protectors of the people that they love, right? Do you assume that boys are also natural protectors of the people in general?
Really, I do. Yeah, because for the most part, if you watch out there in society, boys want to do the right thing. They want to protect the person who looks like they're being beaten down. Like if they see something not right, for the most part, the boy will go over there and he will try to defend the underdog. So unless he's been beaten down too much and he doesn't feel comfortable and with who he is, yes, he will go over and he will naturally protect anyone who needs protecting, or anything, animals included.
Is that a physical protection, or is that only a physical protection, or can that be an emotional protection?
It's emotional as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Boys will step up, and you know, like when girls are going through something emotional, it seems to be the boys that'll step up and take care of the girl. So in the adult world, sometimes like with my daughter, she has two boys who have not been taught the masculinity, femininity thing, but boy, I tell you what, these boys are like vying for her heart, let me tell you. But both of them are her best friends. Like they will come and they will talk to her, and they're her best friends. They help her through things. She helps them through things, and it's really beautiful. So boys are naturally empathetic and loving and caring. Really deep down they are. It's just getting through that shell.
Yeah, you give me hope, because I'm going to stand on hope for this. Because and not from little boys, right? I stand on hope that when they're growing into their manhood, that that protection never goes away for humanity at the largest scale. Because
that's my hope and goal too.
Yeah, because what I see is with a lot of these now philosophies and the disconnection between men and women, is that a lot of men are like, I'm not protecting any woman. I see that. I hear that. You see it with domestic violence as a topic, you all. Like, you see men that are like, I'm not going to intervene. And so that's why I asked the question, do you think that men and boys are inherently protectors? Because to me, if that was the case, they would automatically jump forward. And so I think that is a fascinating, I think it's just fascinating work. And you have done the work. I just want to say that. You have done the work. You have put thought into what it is. And I remember you saying, like, I'm not a social scientist. I'm not a this. But you have a social scientist brain, from a fellow social scientist to a social scientist, because you were aware of.
Thank you.
You have a high awareness. And I think that this tech that you have created will become something foundational that everyone needs it in their home.
Thank you.
Everyone needs it in their home. So Lisa, as we wrap, I like to give you the final word. What would you like to say to our listeners?
Boy, well, thank you. I really want the world to be a safer place for our boys. Once we make it a safer place for our boys, it's a safer place for our girls. And it's always reciprocal. Always.
Uh-oh. All right, Yoruba, I think we're going to have to, did she get disconnected? Oh, is she back? Yoruba, let's go ahead and wrap. And then at some point in time, I'll get her. Okay, we can't see you, Lisa. We're going to go ahead and wrap. And what we'll do is we'll get you to come up with a final word and put it all together.